All right, let's dive right in. Today, we're going to pull back the curtain on how high-growth investing really works. We're on the hunt for those super rare, game-changing opportunities that can seem to pop up out of nowhere, the ones that have the potential to create some serious wealth.
So it really all starts with this one big question, right? How do wealthy investors actually get those massive returns you always hear about? I'll tell you, it's not about getting a nice, safe 10% on the stock market. Nope. It's about finding something very, very specific, something with absolutely explosive potential.
And that something has a name. It's called a unicorn opportunity. You can think of this as the holy grail for any early-stage investor. It's a company that has the right DNA to scale from, a pretty small valuation today into a billion-dollar powerhouse down the road. This right here is the engine for true wealth multiplication.
But here's the thing. Finding these unicorns isn't just about getting lucky. There's absolutely a method to the madness. There's a framework that smart investors use to filter out all the noise and spot these rare gems way before the rest of the world catches on.
And it really boils down to 4 key traits. First, the company has to be playing in a massive market. You can't have a billion-dollar outcome without a billion-dollar playground, right? Second, it needs a unique product, something that really truly stands out from the crowd. Third, it has to create what's called a blue ocean, and that just means it's carving out a brand new market space, so it doesn't have to get into a bloody fight with competitors. And finally, it's got to have multiple revenue streams, so it's not just relying on one thing to succeed. So keep this little checklist in your head as we go.
Okay, so let's take that framework and put it to the test in the real world. We're going to map what is basically a modern-day gold rush happening right now in sports technology, just to see where the smart money is actually flowing, and more importantly, why.
And the scale here is, well, it's absolutely mind-blowing. We're talking about nearly $52 billion in transactions pouring into the sports tech world. And that's not for a whole year. That's just the first half of 2025. This is not some niche little hobby anymore. This is a global economic force, and it's attracting some of the biggest investors on the planet.
Now check this out. If we zoom in on just one little slice of that pie, the youth sports market, all by itself, is a $40 billion industry. Now, for an investor, a number like that is just a massive green flag. It tells you that any company innovating for young athletes and their families isn't just a small-time venture. It's tapping into a market that's incredibly passionate, incredibly valuable, and has a huge runway for growth.
So where's all that capital actually going? Well, the Drakestar report, which is kind of like the Bible for venture capital in this space, it points to these 5 hot zones. Money is absolutely flooding into these integrated youth sports platforms, into the fan and creator economy, and into totally new sports leagues. It's also chasing new tech like Web3 for things like digital ownership and decentralized media for getting content out there. And this is what brings us to our case study for today, the No Backboard Basketball League, or NBBL for short. Now, this is an early-stage project that, at first glance, might be a little hard to categorize. But as you're about to see, that's exactly where its power is hiding.
And this right here, this is where the NBBL starts to look really, really special. See, it doesn't just fit into one of those hot trends we just talked about. It's sitting right at the intersection of all of them. It's a youth sports ecosystem, it's a creator engine, it's an emerging league, a Web3 platform, and a new media company all rolled into one. And let me tell you, that kind of alignment across so many categories is incredibly rare, and it's a huge, huge signal for investors.
This is a brilliant illustration of that third unicorn trait we mentioned, creating a blue ocean. So instead of trying to compete head-to-head with giants like the NBA or the NCAA in a super crowded, bloody market, the NBBL is creating an entirely new category. By just removing the backboard and building in modern monetization from the very beginning, it's carving out its own uncontested space to play in.
And this brings us to that 4th trait, multiple revenue streams. The whole business model is designed like a flywheel. You've got gym memberships, content royalties for the athletes, merch, events, media rights, and each one of these feeds and strengthens the others. It creates this really resilient, really scalable economic engine that just gets stronger as it spins.
Okay, so we've seen how the NBBL checks all 4 of those unicorn framework boxes. But what does that actually mean in dollars and cents? Let's get to the fun part. Let's do the billion-dollar math and see just how big this opportunity could really be.
So let's start at the very, very top. Remember that first rule for unicorn? A massive market? Well, it doesn't get much more massive than this. The global fan base for basketball is a colossal 3.3 billion people. That's your total addressable market. When you're hunting for a unicorn, you need a playground this big.
Now, if we narrow that focus down just to the United States, we find 27 million people who are actively playing the game. And this is a really crucial detail, because this isn't just a passive sport people watch on TV. It's a culture driven by participants. And that is the perfect foundation for a business model that's built around memberships and training and real-world engagement.
In this slide, this is where it all comes together. The magic here is that you don't need to capture the whole market to build a unicorn. The math is actually pretty conservative. If you capture just 3% of those global fans, at a tiny lifetime value of only $10 for, say, a piece of merch or a digital item, that gets you to $1 billion in value. Then you add on less than 2% of US players as members, and you're looking at $750 million in annual recurring revenue. This is how you build a path to a multi-billion-dollar opportunity.
So now we get to the heart of it all. Let's connect this billion-dollar potential all the way back to that first question we asked. How do wealthy investors multiply their money? This, my friends, is where unicorn math becomes potentially life-changing.
Just imagine for a second that an early supporter gets in at the very beginning with an investment of just $1,000. If the company hits the potential that we just mapped out,
That initial $1,000 transforms into $125,000. That is the incredible power, the leverage of getting in on the ground floor of what could be a real unicorn.
Okay, but let's scale it up. What happens if an early accredited investor decides to put in $10,000? It becomes $1.25 million. And this is exactly why investors hunt for unicorns. They aren't chasing small gains. They're making calculated bets on these huge 100x plus outcomes that have the power to build generational wealth.
And the math behind it is really pretty simple. You take an early share price of, let's say, 16 cents, and you see that grow to a value of $20 per share once the company hits that billion-dollar valuation. That's your 125 times increase right there.
Which leads us to the final and maybe the most important question of all. If the framework fits, if the market is huge, and the math works, then why on earth would an opportunity like this ever be overlooked in the first place?
And the answer is often deceptively simple. Real, true innovation, the kind that creates entirely new categories, it almost never fits into the boxes we already have. The data might be there, plain as day, but the vision required to see a new box being built, well, that's what's truly rare. And it's in that unfamiliarity, in that space just beyond what's currently trending, where the greatest opportunities are almost always found.